working now? Hey folks, it's been a while. Kevin A. here, Fight Designer LLC. Welcome back to PewTube 2020. It sucks. I hope y'all are hanging in okay there. I have lost friends and mentors and animals that I liked, and it's just been a rough week and a rough month and a rough year. So I hope y'all are doing okay, and thank you for tuning in. I have had friends come in and do guest spots and not uploaded those things because I don't know how to edit down the joyful hour and a half conversations I've had with them into something that someone would actually want to watch on this channel. I have not been regular at updating things for a while. I was trying to do the once a week update thing on PewTube, and that's not been going, so sorry. It's 2020. I think we can all cut each other a little bit of slack, right? What I wanted to talk about today, I have this series I've been working on off and on, BIPOC-led police drama that's been shooting locally in Cleveland that I've been involved in a little bit this fall. That's really the only thing I've been involved in this fall because, let's face it, all the theaters and most of the productions are shut down, so there's not a lot of opportunities right now to play, sadly. It's been an interesting production, and they're shopping around to Netflix once they get a few more episodes done. I don't know where they are on things right now. Who knows? That's how these things work. But it's been an opportunity for me to get back on set, which hasn't happened in a while. To get back into gun wrangling, a little bit of fight coordination, and the other stuff that I haven't done as much lately, because now that I'm a union stunt performer, I was kind of waiting for union work, and there hasn't been as much SAG-AFTRA stuff that would actually hire an older, slightly out of shape stunt guy right now. And I'm not union sanctioned to do some of this stuff in terms of gun wrangling and fight coordination. But when it's a non-union web series, they're not even using blanks, it's mostly gas blowbacks and rubber props and stuff like that. And that's the kind of thing where I feel like, if the union's not going to sanction me anyway, I'm okay doing some non-union work on the side there just so I can get back on set. With that, Fight Designer LLC has been kind of stocking up on some new gas blowback props. We've been testing things out, getting to play with some stuff on set. So I wanted to revisit one of the things that I've said earlier, which is that I personally, as a gun wrangler, have a preference for gas blowback over CO2 blowback because in between takes I can top things off, and I can't do that with CO2. CO2 uses these cartridges that you puncture them and then you use them until they're empty, and then you replace them. Which means that if you are in something like live theater or like an important film take where it's important that you get the shot, it means that you replace them every shot. You end up wasting a lot of CO2. You can't just top them off a little bit. It's an all or nothing deal. You take the cartridge out, you put a new one in, or you don't, and you see how many takes you get. As opposed to the green gas or propane, where you take something like this and you kind of fill it up a little bit between each take. Now, there's pluses and minuses to each of those systems, but I also wanted to speak a little more specifically to the differences in the props. So I now have both versions of the Umarex Glock 17s, this being a police drama. I've been doing a lot with Glocks. This particular one I've not used on set, and you can tell because it still has the orange tip on it. But this would be the green gas version, and this would be the CO2 version. And they are pretty darn similar. Both have full trademarks. They have almost exactly the same markings on them. There's a little bit difference here on the green gas has the 9x19 Glock AT up top here. The CO2 has this little hex wrench marking and then a 9x19 up there. Otherwise, pretty darn similar. I don't see a lot of differences in terms of where it says officially licensed. Both have the Glock markings on the base plates, although one has the little circle there, the other does not. They're both pretty good in terms of having the sights and everything, but they are somewhat different materials. So the green gas one, I'm going to guess this is maybe aluminum on the slide. I think it's metal. It's not polymer, but it's a little bit lighter, whereas the CO2 one, I think this might be steel. I'm pretty sure this is steel, but when they say blowback, it's not exactly the same either. So if you look at this, the green gas one moves much further back. The CO2 one, this was billed as blowback when I bought it, but I know that Umarex also has half blowback as one of their sort of tiers, one of their levels. And I would guess that this is kind of to me, this would be half blowback. It doesn't go quite as far back with the slide as the green gas does. So while we'll see some motion when it fires, you can't really get the same effect of pulling it back. It's also not as open in the chamber. So the green gas, yeah, you can kind of see the nozzle there. And you can, if you look up close, if you were doing a slow motion shot of it firing or something like that, you could tell that it's not actually chambering around. You can tell that it's not a full chamber. But at least it kind of looks like it's open, like it could be. Whereas the C02 one, there's, I don't know what this is. I mean, it's the top of the magazine, right? So the magazine looks different. And you can kind of see these steel bits hanging out up there, as well as there's some little bits hanging out there. Let's see if I can do a close-up on that later. So it doesn't look as good if you happen to actually see inside the chamber while it is either being racked or being fired. Either one of those. In terms of actual length of slide motion, the green gas wins. And again, these are the same brand, the same model, but they are a little bit different in how they behave. In terms of the weight and the feel of the slide, CO2 wins. Because this it feels more solid, right? It's got a slightly heavier feel. It's got more of a steel feel, whereas this one I think is aluminum. Still metal, not quite the same. But what does it look like when it's firing? And this is the thing. When we're seeing it, unless you're specifically shooting high frame rate and slowing things down, you're not going to see too much of a difference. In terms of refilling them, the green gas is a bit of a pain because you got to push in this little catch here, and you got to slide the base plate up to expose the valve to be able to fill it. And then you fill it, which will do some good, but with a law of diminishing returns depending on how full your can is. So as your can of green gas gets lower, you'll have a little less oomph to that as well. And with any of these, you do need to either lock the feeder down in the magazine or hold down the slide release, just so it doesn't lock back thinking it's out of ammunition. So let's take a look at this. This is the green gas version firing. Now we've got the CO2 version, and this one I actually put a CO2 canister in, I want to say 3 days ago, so it's not brand new. I've done some test shots. Let's see how it holds up. So it's a different sound. It's a little crisper. It feels sharper. It feels like it's got a little bit more kick. If I kind of limp wrist it and just let it go, it does have a little bit more action to it. It's a better sound. If I were doing this with live theater with a fake suppressor, maybe the CO2 might be a better option, but I'd probably have to replace it every night. You're going to get at least several magazines out of each CO2 cartridge, but again, if this is a union theater and it really depends on that shot happening, I'd probably go ahead and replace it every night anyway. In terms of the kick, I'm going to say the CO2 is crisper. It's a little heavier, whereas the green gas travels more, which is nice, but has a little less oomph to it, at least with a half-empty can of green gas. Again, if you want to start off with a fresh can of green gas each time, or a larger thing of propane with an adapter, you might get a little bit more kick out of that. But then you're also going to have a larger thing that you have to stop using for shows as it gets half-empty, as opposed to with the CO2, where you just have this little 15-gram thing that you got to basically stop using for shows when it's half empty. Either one of those you can still use when it's half empty for testing or things like that, but maybe not for performance. So once you get into the run of a show, once you get on set, you might have to stop using some of these half empty things if you want to really be able to get the full experience of it. With any one of these, you could potentially also put a little bit of a powder or dust or something in there, and then that extra little poof will give you a little bit of an effect as well. I've also used these gas blowbacks for things like execution style shots in movies where it's just not safe to use a blank because it's too close to someone's head. And if they've got loose hair or something, it will move that. So that's another benefit of this gas blowback, is you do get a little bit of motion from that, right? We'll see that something is moving. And so if you need to have a little bit of a displacement of clothing or hair with a point blank shot, this can be one relatively safe way to get that. So with specifically the Umarex, either way. But this is also something where it's going to change depending on the model you've got, depending on how recently you filled it. You know, there's also going to be just some variety in terms of what the model is and how tight the nozzles are. So, for example, this is an AMG STI licensed model of the high capacity double stack 1911 style. And this, you know, I don't like the fact that the nozzles are all bright red because that kind of calls attention to the fact that it's not the same as it would be on a real firearm. But I have to say, this is one of the crispest models I've had. Like, the sound on that is great. The feel of that is great. So if I'm on set and I want the actor to really feel like they've got something that's not a toy, that's about as good as I've found so far. And then this does have the full motion, like the green gas does, but this is another C02. So it's going to be a little bit different depending on the model that you've got, the brand that you've got, the you know, the specifics of just the type of prop that you're dealing with. And this is, you know, this is a race gun. This is like some John Wick stuff here. So it's got the flared mag well, it's got the oversized magazines with the base plate. It's a full-size 1911 double stack. So this is a little bit fancier than you'd find for most service weapons. But I do appreciate the details on this with the functional grip safety, the thumb safety, those nice cutouts. You know, it can be a nice character choice depending on what kind of character you're dealing with. And this is another CO2. So, you know, I have to say, there are specific times and models in which I'm starting to change my opinion. A year ago, I was saying, you know what, CO2 is really not the best choice. Green gas is the way to go. Now, I don't know. I'm kind of coming around. I think both have their place. I think green gas is a great option. I think CO2 is a decent option. I'm still not as huge a fan of the way that you have to reload these, and the fact that there's no way to top it off and having to throw out those canisters each time. But they do tend to last longer, so I don't have to fill them up as often. And from some of the stuff I was doing on set with these green gas ones before, it can be kind of a pain in the butt sometimes reloading them between takes. And I'm not a huge fan of having to do that. And I have to do that less with CO2. And if you're able to have some spare magazines on set, that certainly makes it more convenient of just like, let's just swap out a mag between takes and not have to deal with topping things off. Especially if you're dealing with a solo job where you're the only gun wrangler on set and there's a lot of guns you got to go around and fix up for a shootout. So as for this question of green gas versus CO2, I've got to say, it kind of depends, right? It depends on the model. It depends on the brand, it depends on the prop, it depends on whether or not they give you that full travel or just a half travel. It depends on how open the bolt or the chamber looks when it fires, because that also matters to me, especially if you're going to slow motion. It depends on stuff like whether they do wacky colors to draw attention to the fact that it's not real. Any one of those things can be a factor. So I guess what I'm saying is CO2, I owe you an apology. I'm sorry. You have your place. You are able to do a good job on set in the right circumstances. Green gas, I still love you. You know, let's not make this something it isn't. This isn't a falling out. This isn't a meme of me looking over at CO2 while you're sitting at me going like, what? Both of you are good. Can't we all get along? And with a well-known company like Umarex, it's just about knowing which one you want for which shot, which is going to be a little bit more consistent, more reliable, what features you really need out of this particular shot. And with live theater, it's going to come down to reliability 99% of the time, right? Because you can't just swap things out between takes. You can't just redo a take. So then it's about which one can you really count on. And that also just comes down to the individual prop. You know, I've had things where it's like, oh, this one just tends to stick a bit. This one doesn't. So you've got to test your props. You got to know your props. And that's true whether it's CO2 or green gas. This is Kevin Inoue with Fight Designer LLC, talking a little bit about some airsoft props and how we use them in fight scenes. My apologies to those of you who did interviews with me over the last year who I haven't updated, and everybody who I haven't been in contact with for this last couple of months of just life happening. If you get bored enough, I've got some books out there. I now have the Screen Combat Handbook and the Theatrical Firearms Handbook, both with Routledge or Focal Press. There's coupons usually available through Routledge.com, which makes that usually the easiest, cheapest way to go. If you have something you're dying to see, shoot me an email. Let me know. Put something in the comments. We're all struggling to stay motivated to do the things that we want to do right now. So if there's a way that this has been helpful to you, if there's something else that would be helpful to you, by all means, please let me know. And if not, it might be a little while before you see another one of these videos, and that's okay too. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay sane, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.